The 1968 Olympic coin from Mexico. I have no desire whatsoever to acquire this coin. Let me tell you why. T. Hello, Silver fans. This is T, and you're in the place to be for silver education, acquisition, and entertainment. And hey, today a little bit of history. I showed you that 1968 Mexico silver coin, 72% silver, and you might be wondering, why in the world this guy loves Mexican coins? And why wouldn't I be interested in owning that one? Well, it all goes back to a story that my father told me back in the 1980s. You see, back then, the truth about a terrible incident, a black spot in the history of Mexico, started trickling out of Mexico and even the United States secret files held by our own government. In 1968, Mexico had the honor of hosting the Olympics. This is a big deal back in 1968. Mexico was the first, I believe, Latin American country to host the Olympics. And they had been working hard, very hard throughout the decades to prove they weren't just a third world country that was not worthy of hosting the Olympics. Mexico wanted to use the Olympics to show the world how they had evolved and positioned themselves in a good light on the world stage. Well, just as there were protests and civil unrest in the 1960s here in our country, and in France and other countries throughout the world, Mexico City had its own issues as well. As a matter of fact, the students in Mexico were inspired by some of the other protests they saw around the world. And it got to a point where they started to mobilize and try to get their voices heard. If you know anything about Mexico at all, and I want to let you know, I am of Mexican descent. The land of my ancestors I have a strong love for. I've traveled quite a bit in Mexico over the years and love the people, love the country, but the government, I can tell you right now, and I'm pretty sure any Mexican would tell you today, the Mexican government has been a very corrupt institution. And back in 1968, students at various colleges around Mexico and Mexico City decided that they wanted to voice their opinion on a variety of topics, including the treatment of indigenous people and other social issues. They started gathering in July of 1968 in many places, including the big Zocalo, the big Plaza, the second largest plaza in the world. Students and others started gathering, mainly students started gathering there to get their voices heard. Well, the government did not like this whatsoever because this was coinciding with Mexico's big opportunity to host the Olympics and show the whole world how great the country had become. And tensions began to grow and grow and grow. As the start of the Olympics became closer and closer and closer, and the students made their voices louder and louder, it reached a boiling point and something absolutely terrible and tragic happened. The demonstrations eventually were moved out of the Zocalo in Mexico City, which was a very open-air place. The Mexican army was even involved with tanks and everything, clearing people out of there. So these students gathered in a place called Plaza de Tres Culturas, the Plaza of Three Cultures. Now, one thing that was unique about that particular setting is, well, it was a culturally significant location based on the fact that the three cultures were there all within plain sight. There were ruins from the Aztecs. There were buildings built by the Spaniards when they came over and conquered in the 1500s. And there were modern buildings. The one thing that was unique about that location was that, unlike the Zocalo, there weren't very many good ways in or out of that particular area. Many scholars and historians believe that it wasn't an accident and it was pre-planned, that the Mexican government, by use of the army and other military organizations that they had put together specifically for the Olympics, were going to strike there, strike hard, and put an end to all of these demonstrations that would potentially embarrass Mexico on the world stage. Well, the students were gathered there peacefully, and the army started gathering. Now, that was according to what had been going on prior to that, not that big of a deal. The students were used to protesting and holding up signs and chanting peacefully in the presence of the army. And then something unexpected happened. A helicopter came from overhead, dropped some flares, and all hell broke loose. There is video, and of course, nowadays we all have cell phones in our pockets and with cameras. But back in 1968, those just didn't exist. However, there is some footage of this, what turned into a massacre that was actually recorded by the government and eventually was leaked out to the world. Pretty sobering images there in that video, and very disturbing. If you're wondering, in all the chaos, it came out eventually, although the Mexican government lied through their teeth and said that the students started shooting and provoking the violence by shooting at the soldiers there. It was later found out to the contrary, that the shooting was started by the army. They had bayonets. They were stabbing people. They basically went wild. And that summer of protest came to a head with the army and those others violently beating, stabbing, killing, humiliating, and disappearing many of those young students, male and female. Some of them were put into ambulances after they were beaten, never to be seen again. Others were put in jail and with their families, not having a single idea where they were. And others were just outright killed. And of course, the Mexican government did acknowledge, they couldn't totally deny that it ever happened, because there happened to be 4 sports reporters in town that were there to cover the Olympics who witnessed this tragedy. And matter of fact, it even landed in the paper in London that there was a tragedy. The estimates of how many were actually killed varies wildly. If you believe the Mexican government, well, they said it was only 4 or 5. The students provoked the shooting. 4 or 5 people were killed, and as a result, and that was it. Then they said there was 9. Then they said there was 20. And the families of those that were killed were intimidated into not reporting and not saying a word. And right now in 2021, as historians look back, the estimates as to how many people were killed and disappeared varies between 300 and 1,000. And it all depends on who you believe, but I think it's very safe to say that hundreds and hundreds of these students were killed and massacred. This is called the Massacre of Tlatelolco. Ultimately, the Mexican government, because of intimidation and fear that they invoked on its own citizens, was able to sweep this under the rug, and the Olympics started with great fanfare. Here is another video of the Olympics, and you could even tell from the clip that I'm about to show you that the narrator is doing his best to tell the world all is well here. There's nothing to see, and look at these great games starting. And as I'm showing this video clip, I will also include images of the massacre that happened just 10 days prior to this opening ceremony.
Mexico City, thankfully a city of peace on the Olympic opening day. Some 8,000 athletes and officials packed to the center of the arena to hear the President of Mexico's opening address and watch as the Olympic flag was escorted to the place where it would fly during the game. It was an impressive ceremony, but one of apprehension, for the threat of a civil disturbance was present. As the flag was slowly raised above the heads of the crowd, hopes for a peaceful ceremony began to run high. The excitement of the occasion was electric. With the thousands of balloons soaring skywards, rose the spirits of those in the arena. This, after all, was to be a day of sport, of friendship between peoples. The seal of greatness was placed upon the day of the Olympics with the arrival of the Olympic flame. Forgotten were the underlying threats, forgotten the huge force of plainclothes police mingling with the crowd. All eyes were on Senorita Basilio as she carried the torch towards the bowl where the flame would burn for the next 2 weeks. The lone figure neared the top of that impressive stairway. The moment of Olympic history neared. The 19th Olympiad was seconds away from its inauguration. As thousands of doves soared away from their captivity, the Olympic flame burned brightly over the magnificent new arena. Its message, coupled with the free flight of the birds, was one of friendship, of peace, and of the highest and noblest competition between the assembled nations. All was well in Mexico, the city of 1968.
All of us are familiar with this image of the 1968. This is the one that just sticks out in everybody's mind and perhaps took a lot of the attention away from this massacre that occurred. But just a little history lesson for you, and to sum everything up and wrap everything up, I love Mexico. I love Mexican coins. Anybody who's familiar with my channel knows that. But this one particular coin is something that just makes me think back of this terrible time in Mexican history that I don't want to be reminded of when I look through my coins. Hey, I hope you learned a little today, and if you'd like to see more videos of mine, be sure to subscribe. Hey, thanks for watching. Take care.